So welcome to this Teachappy vlog, and I'm delighted to be interviewing Professor Guy Claxton. Guy is a cognitive scientist and the author of over 30 books on psychology and education. Guy is currently a visiting professor at King's College London. Among teachers, he might be most well known for pioneering the learning power approach, which is a way of teaching that helps learners learn how to learn and ultimately teaching learners how to teach themselves. Guy's latest book is called The Future of Education and the Myths That Hold It Back. And I have literally just finished reading it and was blown away by it. So it's a real honor to have you on this vlog. Welcome, Guy Claxton.
Thank you very much indeed, Adrian. Always a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you. So if we go straight into question one, the first chapter of The Future of Teaching is entitled Punch and Judy. And it charts the history of this kind of battle between progressive and traditional approaches to education. And I remember being in about my 7th or 8th year of teaching, joining Twitter and suddenly hearing these terms like prog and trad. And I literally didn't have a clue what anyone was on about. And when I found out a bit more, I didn't really identify with either side, saw myself as maybe a bit of a hybrid between the two. Although I'd probably be deemed progressive because of my promotion of well-being and things like mindfulness in the classroom.
Definitely.
Can you briefly explain these two approaches, what they entail? And is this really the reality for most teachers in, say, UK schools, that you're either in one camp or the other, or is there a middle way?
I mean, I felt I had to start the book by examining in as fair-minded a way as I could muster what these two extremes or stereotypes actually are, because that's what I think they are. I think, you are, as you described yourself, a hybrid. I think you're typical of, I have no research evidence for this, but 95% maybe, or more at a conservative estimate, of teachers who understand. I think I can't remember exactly, but I think probably the first sentence in my book is teaching is a complex and contingent activity. We change, we are responsive. We have to be. We're in a room full of 30 complex, shifting, dynamic, adaptive systems who are interacting and changing what they're doing. And we have to do that ourselves. Sometimes we need to settle them down. Sometimes we need a bit of firm discipline. Sometimes, wherever possible, we might allow more freedom or more autonomy. Sometimes we allow them to chat with each other, or we give them a little coaching session about what good discussion looks like and sounds like, and so on. So I think, to any fair-minded person, as politicians are inclined to say, the interesting bit of teaching, and particularly as far as the future of teaching is concerned, sits in that middle ground, that hybrid ground, which is dynamic and shifting and flexible and fluid. So we're talking about two stereotypes here, and they probably have existed and to some extent do still exist, but I think they're minorities. I think, the number of complete Rousseauian progressives who are all, laissez-faire and whatever you want to do, and any kind of discipline is going to crush their little individual spirits. The number of teachers who are fully at that end of the spectrum, I think, are minimal, although, there may be one or two, particularly in alternative education settings, perhaps. And likewise, at the other end, at the kind of super trad end of things, there also, there may be a few teachers who are firmly of that persuasion, but most of us are more hybrid and more in the middle. But we need to try and, these extremes, particularly the traditional extreme at the moment, is very powerful. And it's been powerful because it's claimed not only a small vociferous group of advocates who are all, I'm sure, as well-intentioned as you and I are, but their view is that there is only one effective or appropriate way of teaching, and that has been conclusively mandated by the cognitive science. Now, that's a very powerful claim. It's like not only claiming the moral high ground, but it's claiming the scientific high ground. And teachers, who don't have the time or the background to go into the technicalities of these things, you know, can easily be persuaded by an authoritative voice talking about technical concepts like working memory or self-regulation or cognitive load or whatever it might be. And as a cognitive scientist myself, you know, going back to my PhD, my DPhil in Oxford in psycholinguistics a long, long time ago, you know, the cognitive science which was being represented to teachers by this lobby did not conform at all to my understanding of contemporary or even recent history of what is being discussed within the world of cognitive psychology. Things are nothing like as cut and dried as they've been presented to people. So the book is a kind of a cry for the middle ground. I mean, I go out of my way to say, yes, the progressive side has also been naive and overclaiming, and in some ways has been its own worst enemy. But, you know, and the traditionalists think that they're reacting against an ascendancy of progressivism, which you know, it was around. There is some, as James Mannion often says, you know, there are grains of truth in most of what people say, but it gets over-polarized, exaggerated, and sort of bifurcated. So it is made to look as if, you know, there are these two warring factions, each of which sees what I call the bright side of its own way of going about things, but also caricatures the shadow side of the way the other group goes about things. You know, so the traditionalists think they're all about sort of, you know, being knowledgeable and studious, disciplined and conscientious, and intellectual. Progressive think they're all about helping kids be curious and collaborative and imaginative and independent and self-reliant and so on. And the traditionalists look at the progressives and what they see is self-indulgence and lack of discipline and lack of respect for knowledge and tradition. And the progressives look at the traditionalists and they see a group of people who are literal minded and rather harsh and grindian and unimaginative and only concerned about test results and so on. So you end up with this sort of caricature, this literal sort of Punch and Judy show. And meanwhile, whilst the bullets and the mortars are whistling overhead, all the interesting stuff about tinkering our way towards a 21st century pedagogy is going on quietly in the middle. You know, and I want to kind of, you know, raise a cheer for what's going on in the middle and say what you're doing is also legitimated by cognitive science. So don't feel intimidated.
They tell me life is beautiful.